All right. Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with John Henny. John, welcome. So awesome to have you here today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Gert Malak. You and we wouldn't even be talking if it weren't for Gert. And I'm trying to remember. I think it was James Schramko, who I've known James for years, and he connected Gert and I, and then Gert connected you and I, and it's just this podcast has ended up really taking on a life of its own. And we have been making such a big impact through this podcast. And I just keep getting connected with more and more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself to interview. And so, Gert, I just want to, shout out to you for the role that you played in connecting John and I. Really appreciate you. And John, I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. And
Same.
so what I'd like to do is we're going to start off. I'm going to turn it over to you and give you the opportunity to just let's set a little bit of context so the listeners know who you are and what you're all about. So we'll share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you do, because you've been doing what you do for about 30 years. And I know I shared this before we hit the record button. I've been stalking you, looking at your website, and I'm just like, man, I'm like really impressed, John, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you there.
Well, thank you. I am a vocal coach, and I have been working with singers and speakers for over 30 years. Started off as a musician myself. I didn't think I could sing and became a drummer and was making a living as a drummer professionally in my 20s. And a roommate of mine started working with this voice teacher who studied with Stevie Wonder's teacher. And I thought, let me take a shot. And this person, Eric Feuderer, showed me how to use my voice. And within a couple of years, I moved from the drums to singing. And then I ended up studying with Stevie Wonder's teacher himself, Seth Riggs, who has taught like every celebrity, was huge, still teaching in his 90s. Wow. And with Seth, I began to not only teach other teachers, but I began to train other voice coaches, and then saw that the elements that make a compelling singing performance, the way that singers will use tone and different tensions, they speed up, they slow down, their melodies, all of those devices work for speakers. And speakers can not only get their voices healthier and more vibrant and sounding better, but they can also find ways to hold people's interest. And just as great singers are able to infuse their voice with emotion so that you're absolutely slayed by them, you can infuse your voice with emotion as well. And your voice is the number one connector and communicator of emotion. And when you move someone emotionally, that's how they make decisions. We make decisions based on emotion. Yeah. We know that. And the voice is the number one mover of emotion. So my passion is to help people just discover their best voice and to help them discover their best way of connecting with others and communicating.
Wow. So like I said, I went to your website and I saw like, man, one thing that was evident, you've been doing what you do a long time. And you have worked with a lot of people, a lot of names that people would easily recognize and stuff. And yes. What is, and you can probably come up with a lot of answers to this question, but I'm going to invite you to just kind of really think about something that really, an experience that really stands out in your mind where you, through the work that you do, what you were just talking about, helping one of your clients like just connect on such a more emotional level than they were able to before they started working with you, and what ultimately came from them now being able to do that.
The one that comes to mind was one of the first voice users I worked with, because I'd been working mostly with speakers, and this person was a successful trial attorney. Okay. And he was just absolutely struggling with his voice. He was experiencing fatigue. People couldn't hear him. He was starting to withdraw from social situations because everybody was straining to hear him, and he could feel his voice getting physically tired. And of course, he was very worried about the impact it would have on his job and his clients. And
Okay.
so he was sent to me by an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he'd been to see some other voice professionals. And I just worked a number of these scales and these singing scales. And he started to get his voice stronger and stronger. And then he came back to me and he said, you know, I was just at a social function that I would not have gone to. And everyone was able to hear me. And you could just tell his confidence
Mm-hmm.
had come back. He was standing taller. He was smiling. He just had a renewed energy and passion for what it is that he does. So this is somebody who knew how to convince with his voice, but his voice had started to fail him. And then I've seen one thing that really impacted me, the power of emotional connection, was this person was a session singer. So they would sing background vocals on commercials. It's a voice you would have heard, but not know the name. And she was having real vocal trouble. And I asked her to sing something. And I'll never forget, even though she was struggling, her ability to connect emotionally had me nearly in tears by the time she stopped singing. And so it was just a powerful reminder of what this instrument truly is. And I've just seen people, when they get their voice working well and they like how their voice sounds and they feel confident, they're better able to impart what it is they really want to communicate and better connect. And those emotional intentions become amplified.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because, I think of these shows like American Idol that so many people know of. And we've all, if we, as we've watched those kinds of shows, we've all had the experience of hearing somebody who has just really got that dialed in, and how that does make us feel when we get to witness that. It's just, to be on the receiving end of somebody with a gift like that is just, you're right, it's this emotional thing. It makes us just feel absolutely amazing, like, wow, look at that, and the same with somebody who is speaking and can tell stories and share experiences that just connect with us at the core of who we are. Is just, man, if and I've been on the receiving end of that too, and in fact, I have been blessed to call a lot of those people friends of mine because I felt such a connection with them through their speaking and stuff. And so this is, I mean, I'm sure as we're talking, people are listening, going, man, I can totally relate to this because I have been on the receiving end of that. And I'm sure there's probably a few people listening going, you know what? I want to deliver more of that. I want to put more of that out into the world myself too. And so, okay, so I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. And I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, John, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And John, I'm just like really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, it really was that first voice lesson I took.
Okay.
Because up until then, I didn't think I could sing and kind of didn't have interest in it. But playing the drums and getting gigs, you can get more work if you can at least sing backup vocals. So I thought, you know what, I'll try this. And my first teacher, Eric, really changed everything. He showed me that the voice is an instrument that we can learn to play like any other. And from Eric, I met Seth Riggs, who was just connected throughout the voice world. And from there, I started training other voice teachers. And a lot of the voice teachers that I worked with are now leading voice teachers in their area, and I meet people through them, and I've been able to meet just brilliant voice scientists and researchers. And all of that, my life completely changed from just taking a chance and going to that one lesson.
Yeah. And so if you look back on that one lesson, and so how long ago was that? Do you remember what year that was in when you had that first lesson?
Yeah, that would have been probably the mid 1980s.
Okay, so 80 to 90 was in. So we're talking.
Yeah, and then I performed as a singer, so I didn't go right into teaching.
Yep.
So from that, I still was doing my music career and got signed to a small record label, got a record deal that went belly up and all those things. And then in my 30s thought, I don't want to go out on the road anymore. Maybe I should start teaching. But yes, it was that long ago.
Yeah, wow. And so if you think about that one relationship that 40 years ago with you and Eric, and as a result of that, what has come from that, and I'm sure you could probably come up with lots of examples, but we can start with one. If you decide that there's more that triggers and that kind of feel led to share, then fantastic. But what is one thing that came from that relationship that where you had been able to make a really big impact, and hands down that would have never happened if not for that original relationship with Eric that started 40 years ago?
I think the biggest impact, and Eric had championed me to begin teaching. And so it was pushing me into education, and I was resistant. I wanted to perform, and also I was worried about that idea that those that can do, those that can't teach, that ridiculous lie. I think it's from a George Bernard Shaw play, but everybody runs with it. And basically, once I stepped into the realm of education and being able to help others and really understanding what it's like to put yourself into service, and how ultimately rewarding that is, because you think, I wanted to be the star, I wanted to be the performer, and now I was in a position to make it about everyone else. And yet I was more fulfilled doing that than performing. And through that impact, I've been able to work with thousands of singers. I've trained hundreds of voice teachers. And so I feel like the ripple effects of that are something that's very special to me.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that, because I'm kind of this behind the scenes guy too. I get, I facilitate relationships that have impacted millions of people. And those millions of people, pretty much all of them will never know that I was even there, that I even had a hand in any of it. But that's okay, because I know. And yeah, I'm not in the front and center on stage in the limelight and all that. And I'm totally cool with that. I don't really want to be there. I like the role that I've carved out for myself. It's incredibly rewarding and fulfilling, and as I'm sure it is for you too, and stuff. And so,
yeah, I had the opportunity recently. One of my favorite artists actually contacted my front desk, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is a joke, but I hope it's not. And I ended up being able to work with this person and prepare him for a live television show. And there was one note in particular on a song that everyone would know, huge song. And we worked this note because he was having a little bit of trouble with it. And when he nailed that note, it was just, I was jumping up and down in the air. And of course, no one knows that I worked with him, completely behind the scenes, but it's just so thrilling to see your work have an impact.
Yeah, totally. And like, that is, I'm sure, what inspires you most about the work that you do is just, the impact that you're making and stuff. And so, you know, so if you look at, and I don't know what, what you can share and what you can't share. So I'll defer to you on that. But if you look at all of the people that you have served in through doing your training and teaching over the last 30 years, what is one of the experiences you've had in working with someone that has been most inspiring for you because of the impact that was made?
I'll tell you, some of the most inspiring work I've done is working class musicians, people
Okay.
that are just out there and they're just grinding gigs. They're on cruise ships, they're performing in casinos, Broadway performers, not household names.
Mhm.
And when they are struggling with their voice, it impacts their very livelihood. So those opportunities I've had to work with those people and also business people who are struggling with their voice to restore their voice and their confidence and their ability to make a living from their voice. And I'll tell you, it's not just singers that make a living from their voice. Everyone in business is making a living from their voice.
Yeah.
Your voice is incredibly important. And it's being able to do that uh, is just so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. And the audience of this podcast are entrepreneurs, they're founders, they're CEOs. They, in many cases, are the face of their company. So what insight or perspective would you have to offer those? Because I'm sure there's people listening to this going, okay, you know what, John, or Kevin, I really appreciate what John is sharing here. And what insider perspective would you have to offer those entrepreneurs, those founders, those CEOs?
I would quote a study that was done recently at Yale University, and they took 1,700 subjects. And the idea was to see how accurately they could understand what the other person was feeling. And what they did is that they were able to see and listen to the person. Then they removed the audio so they could just see body language, because we
Okay.
talk a lot about body language and communication. And then it was just voice only. They either turned out the lights or put an obstruction between the two. And it was when they removed everything but the voice that the accuracy went up, that they were much better able to feel what the other person was expressing. We put a lot into our appearance, wearing the right suit and tie, and our body language and how we're going to stand, and our management skills, all important. But if your voice is not connecting, if your voice is not sharing your emotion, because emotion moves people and we are social animals, we're very tuned to emotion, you're missing a huge advantage. Most people in business don't think about their voices, they take it for granted. But the power, I will tell you, if you think about the negative side of this power, you won't find a cult leader or a con artist with a bad speaking voice.
No, you
They
won't.
understand. They understand that the voice is the way. And the more that leaders understand that their voice is one of their most important assets, they will gain an advantage that most are missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, John, for anybody listening to this going, man, Kevin, I really like John. I like the way he shows up. I like what he stands for. How can they find out more information? Any resources or tools that you have that you can let them know about so they can find out more information about what you do?
Yes, my website is compellingspeaker.com,
Okay.
and you can go there. I've got speaking tips. I've got warm-ups for speakers just to make sure that your voice is healthy. I'm also just about to release my book, The Compelling Speaker. And so you'll be able to find that on Amazon and Audible. And yeah, you can look me up on YouTube, John Henny Vocal Studio. I'm there as well.
Awesome. 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 Well, John, I really want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. I really appreciated, you just being here and sharing from your heart. Any last thing that you feel compelled to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I I want people to rediscover the music in their voice. You know, when they don't know what started first, singing or speaking, and they think one of our first languages was actually this emotional sung language. And speaking and singing are basically two sides of the same coin. And when you start finding that inner music, because we're all born with music within us, I don't care if you think you can sing or not sing, your voice can become an instrument that people want to listen to.
Very good. Very good. Well, John, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm really excited to get it out there and share it with other entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.